And we've been looking at the life of the Apostle Paul, the life of the Apostle Paul. And this topic, man, I just can't get enough of it. It's like the Lord speaks to me about it all throughout the week, and I hope it's been resonating with you. 8 types of relationships that we learn that you have to master from his life. We said that we've been looking at 2 Timothy chapter 4, 2 Timothy chapter 4, and that's the last chapter in Paul's life. That's the last chapter where he's reflecting on his life, and this is from prison. And he's reflecting on his life, and we said what's staggering, what's sobering, what's so surreal about this reflection is, as he looks back over his life, the things that come to mind were not his accomplishments. They were not the churches he started. They were not all the things that he did, but the things that came to his mind were his relationships. And what's exceedingly profound about it was he's very honest about these relationships. Some of them were good, some of them were bad. And I draw tremendous solace about it because he's keeping it real. We've been looking at it. It's very politically correct to put a spin on things in the evangelical world and to pretend like there's no strife, there's no marital problems, there's no wayward children. Everybody is happy and we go every day singing Kumbaya. But that's simply not quite the truth. And Paul was not scared. He was a faith person, but he wasn't scared to call it like he saw it. So we're talking about 8 types of relationships that you have to master to fulfill your destiny. We said we could summarize this entire teaching in one key maxim, and that maxim is simply Paul knew, this is the key, how to leverage the positives or the strengths from the good relationships and how to minimize the toxicity from the wrong ones. If we could quit right here. I have to learn how to maximize. In my relationships, in my life, God has placed divine relationships, and I thank him for them daily. And the key is to learn how to maximize the benefits, the fellowship, the camaraderie, the encouragement, the support from the right relationships, and minimize the negativity, the toxicity, the hurt, the resentment, the unforgiveness, whatever it is from the wrong ones. Paul knew how to do that so well. It's also particularly interesting as we've taken this journey and this really speaks to me, and I believe it'll speak to many of you, despite the fact that he's very candid about how the wrong relationships hurt him or impacted him. Alexander the coppersmith did me great harm. Demas has forsaken me, for he loves the things of God. Despite being hurt, this is the key, and when we look at the chapter, you'll see it again. Paul realized he was still trying and striving for connection with people, despite the fact that people close to him had hurt him. And if you're honest, that's tough to do. You start saying things like, mama didn't raise no fool, and fool me once, shame on me, and fool me twice, however that little saying goes. But Paul, even in his last chapter, people had done him wrong. We read in 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 15, he said, at my first offense in Asia, no one stood with me. We said that Asia was the place that he spent most of his life. Not most of his life, it was the place that he spent most of his focus. He poured out most of his heart. Ephesus was the epicenter of Asia, and that was the place where he put most of his energy, most of his heart. Yet at his first offense, the place that he had served most, at his first offense, 2 Timothy 1:15 tells us, no one stood with him. Now that's enough to make you get shut down. And we've been discussing the fact that solitude is your friend, but isolation is your enemy. If you go through an experience where no one stands with you, if you're like me, your default button is to isolate. But despite the things that we looked at last week when we talked about relationships that disappointed, even in the last chapter when he knew his death was imminent, he was still looking to connect with people. And we said the principle is if your brokenness has occurred because of people, part of your healing will occur because of people. And that's why you need community. That's why you need spiritual family. So we're talking about 8 types of relationships that you have to master to fulfill your destiny. But I want to emphasize those 2 points. I'm going to be excessively redundant. your prayer tonight when you go home, even as I speak, is, Lord, help me to leverage the benefits. Because what happens is it's a great temptation to have a Titus in your life, a Timothy, a Barnabas, a Silas. These are people who support you, an Onesiphorus, a Luke. And God's sending these divine relationships to encourage you, to undergird you in what he's called you to do. And while these relationships are right in front of you, you're focusing on the Demases and the Alexander the Coppersmiths and the people, to quote Paul, who've done you great harm. And these people are stealing mind share. They're stealing rest. They could be causing you psychosomatic illnesses, when God has these other people that he wants to bring into your life to refresh you. So you have daily, this is a prayer, Lord, show me how to maximize the right relationships. You may not know your biological father, but you have a spiritual father. You may be estranged from your natural family or your family of origin, but you have a spiritual family. You may have a sibling that you're having a hard time connecting with, a sister that you're having a hard time connecting with, but you have a sister in the Lord who's there for you. So critical. So we want to keep emphasizing that. And secondly, no matter how many times you've been burned, learn from Paul. Here's arguably the second most powerful Christian who ever lived. And yet at the 4th chapter, the book of 2 Timothy, he's still trying to connect with people. Because he recognized, despite the harm that people have caused them, if your brokenness has come from people, part of your healing will come from people. Not all of it, but part of it. We've said it before, I'm the biggest word person out. But if you're trying to heal in isolation or grieve in isolation without community, you're limiting an essential component that God wants to use in the healing of your heart. We talked about it before, 1 Peter chapter 4, verse 10. We're all manifold ministers of the grace of God. We're all called to be God in flesh. So we want to really, really focus on those two truths. I want to challenge you. Solitude is your friend. Isolation is your enemy. We looked at Psalm 68, which says, God places the solitary in families. In other words, if you'll trust him, if you'll believe him, he will place you in a community, a safe community, where you can receive much of the nurturing that you may not have gotten in the community that you were born into or the community that you're in, perhaps geographically, etc.